I know I figured somebody just asked me if they're in the right place because they're looking at the title here and how to successfully deliver capital infrastructure projects. Everyone's looking for all the right answers, right? So hopefully I can provide you with some insight in terms of what I've done and some of my experiences, and we'll get right into it, okay? So my name is Nelson Rosa. Sorry, I'm just having a little bit. My name is Nelson Rosa. I have over 15 years experience in operations and capital leading multi-billion-dollar infrastructure projects. That's operations and maintenance. I'm currently working in Toronto, Ontario, Canada, with a program there that's valued at approximately 120 to 180 billion dollars Canadian. And that's if you're looking at 120 billion for capital and then another 60 or so on the operation side, okay? I'm working currently at Metrolinx as a senior program manager, quality management, responsible for our quality management system, but I'm not here representing or in any way speaking on behalf of Metrolinx. So this is my overall experience in many different industries, including manufacturing, automotive, robotics, as well as capital infrastructure. Okay. It's not progressing here. Okay. So some of my experience here, you can see on this side here, a little bit of my accreditations on the other side. My main accomplishment really has been around ISO certification of our quality management system at Metrolinx for this capital infrastructure. Technical difficulties there. So we'll have to make up some time. So just, we'll try and speed through things along here as best as I can, make sure you have enough time for questions at the end. So we'll get right into it, but essentially from this point forward, what I do want to tell you in terms of when you're delivering capital infrastructure projects is you can't get to the right answers without asking the right questions. And a lot of times you hear people talking about certain things, but they're never giving you the context of what that relates to. One of the things that people talk about a lot is world best practices, but they don't talk to you about the organizational structure. Which part of the world are they being delivered in? What's the contracting model? Any of those questions have the fundamental ability to modify what is best practice. So it's very, very important that you understand your environment, your project delivery model, your vehicle, and many other factors. And we're going to try and get through some of that today with my limited time that I just cut out a little bit. So why this topic? I'm very, very passionate about organizational effectiveness and operational excellence. I know that is a bit of a strange topic at a Project Controls Expo where most people are talking transactional, a lot of tools and data and information, but I wanted to come at it from a different angle. And I wanted to come at it from an angle which all of that sits on, which are, what does your organization look like? How is it being designed and developed to actually be able to perform? Do you have quality management system in place for your processes? Do you have the right culture, which is basically going to empower your people to communicate, collaborate, and trust? The number one basis of any successful organization is trust. If you don't trust somebody to make the decisions, then you're not going to allow them to make the decisions, and you can never deliver a capital infrastructure project if you are vertical. You have to flatten out the organization as much as you can. I was just walking by across and I found somebody speaking about the biggest challenge, and I know this isn't in here, but the biggest challenge that they had was in getting everybody aligned and rowing in the same direction to achieve a common goal. That's really what operating models and organizational designs do for you, is to be able to align you to make sure that you're delivering and working in the same way. The only way that you're going to do that is with trust. So what is a capital infrastructure project, capital mega infrastructure project, if you will? Usually they're defined by large scale, high cost, complexity, and long duration, significant impact and influence on economic development, social structure, and environment. The one that is not up there is usually a very high-powered profile political figure who is very upset most of the time because your capital project is running late or over budget. Okay. We didn't want to put that one up there. I know it's being recorded, but that is a fact usually. So I apologize for bringing up this example, but I think it's a well-known example, and it's not meant to pick on any particular project, because I'm sure all of you are here because you had a project that has gone over budget or over schedule, and if you haven't, I want to talk to you, because then I could learn something from you. So in this particular case, we're looking at the Big Dig. So it was the project done in Boston, an absolutely insane project where they were going to bury the highway infrastructure under the city. So it was originally budgeted at $2.8 billion in 1982. It came in at $14.6 billion in 2007, right? 400% over budget. Now, in today's dollars, you're looking at about $17.87 billion. Now, I'm sure there's a lot of factors that went into that, and we'll get into more of these as we go on. In terms of what were the circumstances, it's never everything that is reported, but the fact remains that it was budgeted at 2.8 and it came in at 14.6. In terms of schedule, it was budgeted for scheduled for 7 years, and it came in at 16 years, 9-year delay. Okay. Again, having some experience in working in large metropolitan cities, very, very difficult building infrastructure, particularly flat infrastructure. It is very difficult in these metropolitans. Okay, so I'm sure they encounter a lot of things that they weren't expecting to encounter. So how's it possible that with all these experienced people and projects to learn from, all these project management tools that you're seeing out there, and all of the AI innovation that's going to come to save us, that we still have project overruns? Okay? And I know I say that, I actually do a lot of AI work, but like you hear a lot of people talking about AI and how it's going to save everything. AI works on these fundamentals that we're going to talk about today. So today we'll expose some critical success factors with practical examples to help you understand why projects are experiencing cost and schedule overruns. Okay? And again, a really important point, as I was just talking to some colleagues outside, with this US $1 trillion infrastructure package, what will cost and schedule overruns do to your U.S. economy if you're talking just 100% over? Maybe it's a little bit more. I don't know what the average is. I didn't go that far into my research, but it is significant. Okay? So 4 areas that I want to touch on today, and we're going to have to get through them to hopefully a little bit quickly so that we can have some time to get to your questions. But really, project uniqueness bias, deficient operating models, organizational design, lack of quality management systems or process, and then organizational culture. Okay? So the first one is quite an interesting one. How many of you here, other than the networking opportunity, have heard of world best practices or are here for world best practices? No? One? Just one? Okay. We'll take one. We'll take one. So there's good news and there's bad news here. So basically, if you do believe that your projects are truly unique and never been done before, then you won't be able to leverage any of the world's best practices because they don't apply to you. You're doing something completely new and revolutionary, so you're just going to have to figure it out on your own. So I can tell you that differences will always cost you time and money. So if you're looking to save on time and money, try and look for similar projects, even partial projects, different phases that you can pull risk registers from, you can pull processes from, you can pull schedules from. All of that information is time and money in your pocket. Okay? Won't get into all of it because we're trying to make up on some time. But by show of hands, how many of you work in an organization that has a clear operating model and organizational design with handshakes that you can confidently explain? Okay, we got one again. It's very good. How many of you have no idea what I just asked you? That's what I thought. We see this a lot. Thank you for being honest in the back. We're going to try and get through this, and I know this is a big topic and a lot of things to get through. It's a limited time, but I'm going to do my best to explain to you so you can ask the right questions. So operating models is a framework on how an organization is structured to deliver value to its customers, stakeholders, and achieve its strategic objectives. It provides clear picture of the organization's capability and structure, ensuring all components work together effectively and efficiently, promoting a healthy culture. Basically, how do we sing Kumbaya together to get this thing done? Okay? So there actually is a framework. It is known as an operating model, and it varies in structure and design, and I'll show you an example. But there is an actual framework that you can set up so that everyone understands this is what my division produces. This is what my department produces. This is what I produce, so that it's clear in terms of what's coming in and what's coming out and to who it's coming to and from. So again, we'll get back to those world best practices. When people come up and they're telling you about world's best practices, they leave out some very important context, which is, what is the environment the world best practice is in? Is it being delivered in Eastern Europe? Is it being delivered in North America? Is it being delivered in the Middle East? Very, very different cultural norms, laws, regulations that you need to comply with. So that's a very important contextual question that you need to ask. Okay? Again, what is the operating model? Do you have an operating model? We just get it done. We just kind of sit together and we get it done, right? Does the organization have a quality management system? What is the delivery vehicle, which we already touched on? Is it a DB, is it a DBFOM, is it a P3, a progressive? Depending on the different models, all impact how you work, how you deliver that, okay? And then lastly, are you the named constructor or are you the named owner? Very important in terms of what your actual role is in that agreement and what you can and can't do. Okay. So operating model, and very quickly, outlines the end-to-end business processes, governance capabilities, and systems needed to execute an organizational strategy. Whereas the organizational design is something that you're more familiar with, which is your traditional organizational charts. Who sits under who reports to who, how are things structured from an organizational perspective. This is very familiar usually to people. The other one, not so much. Okay? That one sits over top of this one. Okay? Here's a quick example. Don't dissect into what exactly is on here. I will just basically show you how this operating model works, a very simplified version of it. But essentially, people ask, what is the right operating model? Organizational design. The answer always starts with it depends. It really depends on your organization. It really depends on which stage you're at in your project lifecycle. I'll take you through a couple of samples here very quickly, through a project lifecycle, if you will. So in this particular case, when we're starting out here, this one is in the tender and RFX development phase or procurement phase. So essentially, ultimately, who's accountable will be commercial or procurement for the development and execution of that contract agreement. So you're thinking, okay, so they would develop the contract agreement. What do you need all the other stuff for? All the other stuff are supporting into that contract agreement. Some people, when you're looking at this particular model here, are thinking, well, why do you need project controls? Well, you need project controls because they're going to be giving you what data they need, how they need it, and how often they would need it. So if that doesn't get captured into your contract, that data will become virtually impossible to get, which means your reporting on your project health and status will be very, very difficult to get. So quite often, some pieces like that are overlooked. So if you look here, we've got commercial or procurement leading, and then we have all the remaining support functions that would support the development of those contract agreements, okay? Very, very importantly, across the top is our governance, which is always an important topic. And essentially, it's who decides what by which process. Okay? Very, very important piece. And then here you've got obviously your reporting from bottom up. And this is a very basic initial stage of your operating model. If we move into the design, everything is exactly the same. I'm not going to play any tricks on you. But essentially here what you see is who's ultimately accountable is engineering at this stage, where they're setting up technical and functional requirements, and that's going to give you that robust design that you're going to need to when you get into commissioning and hand over all of your ITPs and all of your other QA, QC functions. A lot of that is going to be developed and designed here, right? Your 30%, 60%, 90% designed, your issue for construction, that's all going to be set up here. Now we get into the bread and butter of it, which is project delivery, so you're in build and delivery. And in this case here, you see there that you've got your PMO, so they're responsible for project management and delivery of the asset. Again, commercial support, commercial plays now a role of supporting, engineering plays a role of supporting, and then again, whatever roles you need to support. In this case, I've shown early works as well as property acquisition, permits, and licensing. Whoever is supporting that project delivery team to make that project successful. Okay? You see over top, you've got project controls. Some organizations that I've been to and that I've seen have project controls embedded into a project delivery team. Usually not a good idea, and I'll tell you why. One of project controls' very important functions is reporting, and reporting needs to be independent and unbiased. If you have a risk and your project manager doesn't really want to expose that risk at this point in time, you will not expose that risk at that point in time. So it's very important that that risk be reported, because as somebody said when I just walked by, bad things don't get better with time. And that's so true, okay? So that's why it's structured in this way. And again, I go back to there is no right or wrong. It's whatever works for you. Okay? So this one here is just going through an operation. So now you're in operations and maintenance. And you'll see here the most important probably image of the day, which is getting all of the fish to swim in the right direction, or all of your employees, departments, divisions to swim in that right direction. This one is very familiar, I think, to most people. This is what we refer to as organizational design. So you can see in this particular case, it's designed for a quality function, which I'm currently responsible for. My structure is very similar to this structure that you're seeing here. So we've got a quality management system pillar, a content management system pillar, project assurance, which includes project assurance and quality control. We've got an audit team as well as a continual improvement team. And then you've got the different layers of junior people coming in, which we train almost as an apprenticeship program, because we can't have enough resources. So we bring in junior people. These are your individual contributors, followed by your leads, and then you get into your management structure above top. Okay? I apologize for the speed at which this is going through, but we lost a little bit of time. So why is this so important? Again, I already touched a little bit on this, but essentially reporting needs to be done independently. And by doing so, it allows you the best opportunity to get those issues and those items as early as possible, to be able to address them as early as possible. So I always refer back to this little saying here, which is good data and information leads to good decisions. Good decisions lead to trust. If you constantly give somebody poor data, they make poor decisions, and then you start to question their ability to make decisions. It might not be their ability, it might just be they got bad data, right? You'd probably be making the same decisions on that bad data that they would. Okay? So trust is really, really fundamental here. I keep going on about trust. Think about you're sending one of your employees or somebody to a meeting with a government official or any other person. You want to make sure that you can sleep to know that they've got this. You trust them fully to make the decision they need to make. And if they can make that decision, they're going to consult. They're going to come back and consult with you before they make or say anything that you're not comfortable with. We all have it, trust. We need that trust. Okay? This is where it all kind of comes together. So we've already talked about operating model, and we've obviously talked a little bit about organizational design, and what pulls it all together is a quality management system. Okay? We're going to get through this very quickly, but a quality management system is a group of integrated processes. That's the key. Everybody has processes. As soon as you start talking about integrated processes, that's where the conversation kind of starts to fall apart a little bit, okay? So what does that mean? We'll get into it in just a second here, but really and essentially a quality management system is as basic as these 4 steps, and this is what I followed to develop ours and how it was ISO certified. Document what you will do what you documented, keep records of what you did, because ISO is going to be asking for that, and so is the auditor, and then continually improve. Simple as that. Okay? 2 methods in which we develop processes. Most people or organizations follow the one on the left there, which is the I method. Generally tends to create a competitive and adversarial working culture, just because you have a lot of deep knowledge in each individual pillar or silo. Pillar is a nicer word, but they're vertical, but they don't understand what's happening to the left or to the right of them. And usually they would report up all of their findings through those verticals, and it leads for leadership to have a very fragmented picture of how the project is doing overall. The way that we develop our process is more in this fashion, which I call the T method. It's a lot more collaborative, where you bring in cost, schedule, and risk, or various other groups that need to work together. And then you would figure out how cost impacts schedule, how schedule impacts cost, and then obviously your risks. That would all then be brought up to a project controls lead that would then go into reporting to give you a cohesive story or picture of where the project is at and how it's working. Okay? I'm going to try and get through this as quickly as I can so we can get to some questions, so I don't take up all of the time just in speaking. But essentially, a lot of questions around QMSs and ISO. They're too restrictive, they're too prescriptive, they stifle innovation, all of that good stuff that I've heard about. Two things. ISO is an international standard and applies across many industries. They don't know anything about delivering any specific project. The business determines what they will do, what they will document, and to which level. All that ISO says is follow what you documented. The business is what's determining it. The problem that happens a lot of times is the business gold plates their processes, but then they don't do them. If you say, I'm going to open Outlook in the morning, and I'm going to look at it once a day, ISO isn't going to tell you, no, you need to open in the afternoon, you look at it 3 times a day. You just need to follow what you said you were going to do. That's it. Okay? The other one is it stifles innovation. A key component, fundamental component of ISO is continual improvement. So they actually promote innovation. Okay? We'll get into a little bit of culture here. You'll hear this all the time, lots of buzzwords of no blame culture, right? What does that really mean in terms of what it is, okay? I can explain to you more what it means for me, but personally, we gotta stick with some timing here, so we can't get into it. We can get into it after. So culture really refers to the shared values, benefits, and norms and practices that shape the behavior of an organization, okay? So you know when you go into an organization and you have this feel for how it is. Are people truly happy? Are they saying what they need to say, or are they saying really what they mean? You can really feel a culture. It's unspoken language. It's like body language, okay? So I love this slide, so it's not my slide, so hopefully the credits come up on it. But essentially, it's really what happens when the lights go off. So you're sitting in a meeting and somebody is describing something to you, and there's a whole bunch of people saying yes, 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 and then they walk out the door and they're like, I don't know how that's gonna happen, okay? If you have a good culture, they will tell you what's going on. I can tell you on my particular team, I personally believe that they know exactly what is going right and what is going wrong. The culture that is being fostered there is whether they're gonna tell me or not. And I can tell you most of the time, they will give me the heads up of something's going sideways way before it ever does go sideways. Whereas others are finding out that something is going sideways at that senior leadership team meeting, right? Usually through a report, not a good place to find out something isn't going right, okay? So essentially putting all the pieces together, you've got your strategic business objectives, operating model, quality management system, organizational design in alignment. We didn't touch on business performances, which is your KPIs. So essentially, how you set up your KPIs and the alignment of them. If your KPIs for each function, department or division are going in different directions, your organization can never get to its goal, at least not effectively. Okay? And then really importantly, something that nobody wants to talk about, performance drivers. We're all driven by our goals and objectives and our bonus structures. So if you don't align my bonus structure to the organization's key objectives, I'm driving towards my personal objectives. So very, very important. But wait, there's more. Do we have time? How much time are we on? All right, we're doing good. We have time for questions and everything. This one here is kind of the unspoken rule. I don't think that it's all doom and gloom. I don't think that it's all bad. A lot of times, a lot of organizations that I've been to, they struggle with change management. Usually the problem becomes, what was originally budgeted to be built isn't what was actually delivered. There's a pile of scope that was just added that was never accounted for. It was never tracked and approved properly, which means you never got that actual scope change into your budget, right? You never got that contract change as a conformed specification. Nobody's actually gone in and updated. So is it necessarily that we are actually that far over budget and over schedule? Because if you're going in and you're adding that budget to estimate completion, then you're not over budget. Even though you estimated and you budgeted $1 million, if you've added another $1 million worth of scope and you've added that to your estimate at completion, and you've added that to your timeline, it could have been 9 years over the original target, but if you've added 9 years worth of scope and work, then you're not actually overrun. Make sense? So this is really important. Make sure you focus on change management, every last piece of it. So essentially, key takeaways, set up clear goals and objectives. So I always answer the questions, what are you trying to achieve? And what does good look like? How do you know you've gotten there is really the question that I ask all the time. What does it really look like? Model what you want it to look like. Assess your operating model and organizational design. So does the operating model and organizational design promote, accelerate the achievement of your goals and objectives, right? And more importantly, does it foster the culture of communication, collaboration, and trust that you need? And lastly, baseline and set performance indicators. Do the performance metrics support the goals and objectives and outcomes? But again, more importantly, do they drive the desired behaviors? Okay. Conclusion. So really, people are the reason organizations and projects succeed, and they're also the reason that projects fail. So if you take care of your people and you set up your organizations properly, they will take care of your projects. I firmly believe that. We'll just jump into the last point here, but when performing mega capital infrastructure project postmortems on lessons learned and root cause analysis, the results of those are eerily the same, which means when we go in and we look at the failure points of capital infrastructure projects, they always point back to the same root causes, which tells you that they're not actually that unique. Now, are they the same? No. But are they completely unique and you can't learn and leverage data and information from other projects? Absolutely not. So if you really want to make sure that you mitigate cost and schedule overruns, use the lessons learned from other projects. Okay. That's it. We'll open it up for any questions. Silence. I've lost them all. Anybody with me? No questions. I could have elaborated more. I could have gone on forever. Yes.
Sorry.
Oh, sorry. Oh, he has the mic. He has the microphone.
So, okay, so I win, as they say. Hi, Nelson. Bill Shiner with Mace Consult. I'm presently in project controls team in Metrolink subways extension projects.
Yes.
I think one of the couple of points that you mentioned and is those phases, and then how you move through the transition within the phases, because very often development phase very different to implementation phase. So I just wanted to see what your thoughts were on those transitions.
Interesting. It's very interesting that we both work in Toronto and probably in the same building, and we had to come to Washington to meet. So nice to meet you. So you're on the SSE or YNSC? Which one are you? Or on both? Okay, good. Yes, I know exactly. I've been involved in some of those. So, I mean, the reality of it is, in that particular organization, they're going through a learning period. I believe SSE was the first PDB, so there's a lot of learning that needs to happen there still and still growing. And I think that organization is, it does have a healthy culture in terms of they're not afraid to shift and move things and admit when they're wrong and make those corrections. But some of them are also tricky in terms of they're all bound by contracts. So you're learning, but your contract isn't that forgiving and flexible. So I think a lot of the applications that are happening on the SSC over to YNSC will be very valuable. But in terms of moving from implementation to development phase, so we're talking particularly in this case, it's a progressive design build is what we're talking about. So it's a progressive model. I actually don't feel that it's fundamentally that different in terms of it's more iterative, if you will. I call it the agile approach more to capital infrastructure projects, but it will be a difficult transition to take an organization, a project of that size from implementation to development. I also feel that there's some struggle there with old mindset and mentality of P3s, where it's less collaborative. So in that particular case, I think it needs a very clear operating model, and I also think it needs a very strong change management to be able to make those transitions. Okay. Can't get into too many details. I'm being recorded, but we can talk later. No.
Thank you. Great presentation. You mentioned the T structure, the process structure. Can you just explain a little bit more about how that works? Because we have the same kind of challenges with us. You know, you have the I structure and how that doesn't work. But what did you change between the I and the T to make the T work?
We added a lot of time and a lot of arguments, but with a much, much better product. So anybody can develop a process over a weekend. Very easy. You go into a dark room, say we're going to do this and this, go do it. Like, I don't care. We did try that, by the way, so we know it doesn't work. The way that we found that it works, but it does add some time, and it is a little more painful, is workshopping it. So you bring in all of your stakeholders, even stakeholders you didn't know you had, into a room, and you basically, I can tell you one that I facilitated personally was a commissioning and handover process with 42 stakeholders. Like, nobody does that. It's insane. But the final output and the final product is something that 3 years later is still standing. People got behind it, bought into it, and if somebody comes in there that wants to change that process, the entire business actually fights against it to be like, no, we can make changes and improvements and updates to it, but we will not change the process. So what I can tell you, the T method is really about workshopping and getting people's buy-in around the table into that process. It's painful. But the good news is, by the time you get, in my experience, to revision 3, it's a stable process with minor iterations, and it's good. So it's worth the initial investment that you put into it up front. Okay. Anything else? No? Good. I wasn't sure I was going to get through it. I was actually nervous about getting through it. A lot to say in a short amount of time.
In-house right now in your organization. Sorry, just wondering how many of you have operating model, or seen an operating model. So we have one. Any other?
One,
so
two,
three. Operating model, yes.
4?
So okay, so more than.
Good.
So it's quite good.
Yeah, as we've been doing this a little bit and kind of talking more about it as the underpinnings of the organization, getting a lot of blank looks, especially when it comes into capital like infrastructure projects. Where I've come from, manufacturing, automotive, robotics, other industries, this is like bread and butter, it's known. But when you get into like construction, capital infrastructure, it's a completely new space. So it's just very interesting to see. It's really nice to see that people have heard of the operating models. I was getting nervous that I have to explain it like end to end, so it's really good that people understand it.
Yeah, I left an organization that had that, and then the design structure to match, and then I went to an organization where everything's being recorded.
Don't worry, they can only see the back of your head. You're good.
Yeah, so yeah, now it's kind of like every possible decision bottlenecks with like one person. And so we're trying to model what good looks like within our small little department of 20 people, but it's hard to, you know, affect the entire organization of 5,000. So it's vertical. It's extremely vertical.
Yeah.
It's not, there's no trust. And I think it comes down to,
Yeah.
yeah,
I
not
was-
having a clear,
I was in an organization before where they said, Nelson, your quality management system is amazing. Like I love the clarity that it provides, and I really, really like this. But now we need to do the same thing for scheduling and cost and risk. And I'm like, no. The quality management system does that over top. It's not just for quality. They're trying to build the same thing for all the different, I was like, so that's the level of maturity that they were at. But again, it's a road, right?
Yeah.
Good. Yes. Oh, one over there.
Thank you very much for the presentation, very much appreciated. I'm from a mining industry, so we have about 3 operations in our company, mining operations, and we do have a project management office. So this operating model that we spoke about is at enterprise level. And then what is the right way to go about it? Should we have one for the project management office, or we should always align to the enterprise level? Because enterprise level, it will cover how do we manage our operations, how are things done at that level?
So like all good answers, I think it always starts with it depends. And I will, so how do I answer this one? It really depends on the appetite of your organization. So I can tell you in our particular case, where I'm currently at now, we did not certify Metrolinx in ISO 9001. We certified a division of Capital Projects Group in ISO 9001. So there was no appetite to do it at an enterprise level, although I believe now that is the direction they're taking. But, so in your organization, when you say, should it be aligned to the enterprise? Ideally, yes. But if there's not an appetite at an enterprise level, it doesn't mean that you can't organize and reduce the chaos at whatever level you can, whether that's a team, a department, a division, right? So it is easier when it's coming top down. One thing that I didn't get into here were spans of control and spans of influence, is really something that plays a lot of factor into this and how far you could go. But I think what I've seen in my experience in this place and other places is once they see good, it spreads rapidly. So if you're able to influence your department, and then you're able to do something like a lunch and learn, where you share what you've done, others start to look at it and model after it. You become the SME, if you will, or a center of excellence for it. And then the key here is not to have too many fragmented initiatives, because too much of something could become a problem. Like you see in a lot of organizations, everyone is trying to do continual improvements, and you just end up repeating and duplicating efforts everywhere, which becomes counterproductive. So I always tell people, if you've ever tried food without salt, it's not very good. If you tried food with a bucket of salt, it's not very good. So it's always about that fine balance of how much do you use. Okay?
Thank you.
Anything else?
Do you find this is a good teaching mechanism for new hires?
Quality management system?
Yeah.
So most of the organizations I've been to do have a quality management system. This is the first one that I've been to that did not have one until we put it in place. And it's interesting to see, like, from onboarding to retention and knowledge transfer to training. I don't understand how an organization could not have it. So for us in our journey here where we're at now, we're aligning processes and training. So if your training refers to any process, it would have to be aligned with the existing process. So you can't have training saying this is how you do something and here's the training for it and here's the process that is in a different direction. So it's just a lot about that alignment. And I also think it's a really important piece in terms of risk management. People nowadays are traveling and moving faster than ever. all that knowledge, we call it tribal knowledge, is going with that individual. So if you have it documented in these processes, now it's not to say that they're gonna document, every time they reach in their drawer and they pull out this, but you have an idea. Generally, the way that we structured our processes, is there was a lot of resistance around quality management and a lot of the processes, is we've just drawn a line to say, here's what needs to be done at a process level, and then at a procedural level, it's how to do it. I don't care how you do it as long as it's documented, but this is what you need to do. So that's how we've kind of got the business to buy in, because nobody likes to be told how to do something. Like, you're gonna do it like this. It's like, well, I wanna do it differently. Fine. As long as you come out to this outcome, that's perfectly fine. So here's what you're gonna do and the intervals you're gonna do to hit these milestones and this criteria. How you get there, at this point, we don't care.
You had mentioned the aging workforce. That's why I was curious how it played in.
It is a significant, yeah, there's a lot of knowledge. There's a lot of knowledge that is moving, but also leaving. And I think a quality management system is a big play on, or a big resource in how you retain that knowledge. Okay. Oh, sorry, I thought you were coming to give me the hook. I was waiting for the microphone to go down and the music to play, but, oh.
Just one more, Nelson, and I'll leave you alone then.
Yeah.
Just in terms of the knowledge transfer, capturing those lessons learned. You talked there earlier about going from sort of one project which is named SSE and to another one called YNSE. And taking that learning from the other one into the next project. And we've done a lot of work on lessons learned, but I just wanted to see what you thought about that for the rest of the team here.
It's a really interesting one. That's a little bit of my pet peeve on lessons learned and continual improvements. What we found in some cases, and I gotta watch, turn the camera off right now. What we found is there's a lot of uniqueness bias. A lot of projects feel that what they're doing is totally new and revolutionary, even though they're both building a subway or both building an LRT or whatever that is. They wanna do it from scratch because they wanna do it better than the last team. But what we find is quite often when you're looking at the failure points and the success points, they're very much aligned. So in your particular case there, we do collect lessons learned from the project delivery teams, and then so all the project delivery teams, so all 16 projects that we have on the go. Sorry, not Go expansion, but on capital projects group. I have to make sure I'm clear on that. And then what we do is we triage them and we distill them down to unique items. So I always compare it to like a fire. You have one fire, 52 people are calling. You don't have 52 fires, you've only got one. So we have a lot of items that are coming into the continual improvement team under myself that we need to distill down into one unique item, one root cause, and then we distribute those back to the other projects. So in your case, the lessons learned coming out of SSE are being transitioned to YNSE through your P-Qual. I can tell you who those P-Quals are because they report to me. So I can tell you exactly how they are and how that works. Okay. Anything else?
Hi there, Neil Rutland. I run a project controls consultancy in the UK. One of my experience of working on major programs is that often project controls, one of the main problems is that project controls is a bit late to the party. It's a little bit underinvested at the early stages of a program. So that I guess, quality assurance of the original budgets isn't as mature as it might be in the first third or in the middle of a program.
Yeah.
Would you agree with that? And why do you think that is?
I would, and I'll take you back to, if I can, sorry, I apologize, but some people have seen this already. They kind of criticize this piece because they're kind of like, well, if you're developing contracts here, why do you need project controls? But when you get into the delivery phase and you're trying to get data to report, and those data points or the frequency of those data points isn't in your contract for your contractor to provide that information, I can tell you from personal experience, I have a lot of pain points around quality because our quality schedule isn't as robust in some of our projects as it should be because of initially not being engaged. So this is why this looks this big at this point. Most people are thinking, well, You're writing a contract, what do you need all these people for? All these people have knowledge and insight and pain points that can help you put that information into your contract agreement that will save you time. Right? So I agree that nobody is thinking project controls when you're doing procurement. They're like, we're not in delivery. It's okay. We don't need them. But usually what I've experienced is the second you say we don't need them right now, those are the ones that are going to come back to bite you. Bring them in. If they don't need to be there, they'll tell you they don't need to be there. Goes back to the same thing with your process. We bring a bunch of people in to develop a process. They say, I don't need to be here. It's nothing to do with me. Fine. You've missed one meeting. But in a lot of cases, they'll say, where's Betty? Well, who's Betty? Well, Betty does this. I'm like, oh, I didn't know Betty did that. So this is how you get those processes that get it. Because if you develop a process right to the end and then you go to embed it into the business, and Betty wasn't a stakeholder and didn't have any contribution, didn't buy into it, that process is going nowhere, right? Sorry, did I
Thank you.
get...
Yeah, really good presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. The hug? Thank you.